You know, when we think about historical conquest, we usually picture clashing armies, right? Triumphant celebrations. But what if the victors saw their greatest wins not as a prize, but as a profound and even dangerous test? Today, we're going to look at the early Islamic conquests through the eyes of the people who lived them, where every single victory was really a trial of character. Just picture this scene for a second. An entire army, on horseback, plunging into the churning black waters of the Tigris River. This is one of the most fearsome natural barriers in the ancient world. And get this, the soldiers were apparently chatting among themselves like they were just taking a stroll on dry land. This wasn't just some military maneuver. It was an act of absolutely breathtaking faith. So let's really dive into this moment at the Tigris. You've got the mighty Persian Sasanian Empire on one side and the Muslim army on the other. And between them, a river that seemed completely impossible to cross. This was the first great test, facing down a physical obstacle that just defied all military logic.
Okay, so to do the impossible, you need an extraordinary force. The commander, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, put together this elite group of 600 soldiers. They were called the Ahwal Squadron, led by the incredibly tough Asim ibn Amr at-Tamimi. And these weren't just any troops, they were the best of the best, the strongest, the most courageous. They were chosen to take a risk that honestly could have doomed the entire army if they faltered.
And their strategy? It was brilliant. First, a small vanguard, just 60 horsemen, plunged into the river to secure the other side. Once they made it, the rest of the squadron followed. Then, seeing them succeed, the whole army crossed. The Persians watching this were just floored. They were witnessing something that just shouldn't have been possible. So, they've crossed the river, which is incredible, but the story gets even more interesting from here. After that crossing, the Sasanian capital, al-Mada'in, basically fell without a fight. But the most telling moment wasn't the battle. It was what happened the second the victor stepped inside the legendary White Palace. In a moment that you'd think would be for massive celebration and claiming spoils, the commander Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas did something totally different. Surrounded by just unimaginable luxury, he turned the palace into a place of prayer. His very first act was one of humility and reflection. What's really fascinating is what he recited. These are verses from the Quran about the fall of Pharaoh. By reciting them right then and there, Sa'd was reframing the whole thing. This wasn't a victory to gloat about. No, it was a heavy lesson on how quickly worldly power can just vanish. He saw his own triumph as a mirror of a fallen empire, a stark warning that all power is temporary. But the tests didn't stop there. The next one was even more personal. It moves from the scale of armies to the quiet integrity of a single soldier. It's a story about a test of honesty in the face of unbelievable wealth. So a single man finds these saddlebags filled with treasures that are just beyond imagination. We're talking a horse made of solid gold, a camel of silver, the legendary swords of Persian kings. This is life-altering wealth, found by one guy all alone. He brought everything, completely untouched, to be collected, and when they asked for his name, he refused to give it. Why? He didn't want any praise from people. He basically said he was happy with his reward from God alone. His integrity wasn't for show. It was a private thing between him and his faith. And this one act of honesty, it wasn't lost on the leadership. The future caliph, Ali, made this really deep observation to the ruler at the time. He connected the honesty of the people directly to the integrity of their leaders. It shows this culture where righteousness was seen as a chain, and it starts right at the top. And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most profound test of all. This is about the fear, not of losing, but of winning too much. And it focuses on the caliph himself, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and his reaction to the spoils of war. So, after another huge victory, a massive amount of treasure was sent to the capital. It was all laid out in the courtyard of the mosque, just piles and piles of rubies, emeralds, and priceless jewels from the Persian Empire, all in one place. The Caliph Umar takes one look at all this wealth, and he starts to weep. Not tears of joy, but tears of sorrow. And this reaction, it was so unexpected it just stunned everyone there. One of his companions said what everyone was thinking. He asked, "Why are you weeping? By Allah, this is a time for giving thanks." I mean, it seemed like the perfect moment for gratitude, not grief. To understand Umar's reaction, you have to get this one concept, fitna. A fitna is a trial, a temptation, a test.
and the Prophet Muhammad had specifically warned his followers that the greatest fitna they would ever face wasn't poverty or a powerful enemy. It was the temptation of worldly wealth.
And here's Omar's explanation. He wasn't crying because he felt bad for the defeated. He was crying because he was afraid for his own people. He saw all these riches not as a reward, but as a seed of destruction, something that would cause envy and then hatred and then division from within. The greatest danger wasn't the army on the outside, it was the temptation of their own victory.
So when you pull all these stories together, the river crossing, the palace, the anonymous soldier, the weeping caliph, what do they all point to? They point to a completely different way of looking at life's purpose. The goal wasn't to subjugate the world, it was to subjugate the self.
For every single one of these people, from the common soldier all the way up to the caliph, winning the battle was never the ultimate goal. The victory itself was the real test. The true battlefield was internal, a fight against pride, against greed, against the ego.
This quote from Salman al-Farisi, which he said while crossing the Tigris, just captures this worldview perfectly. He believed that even the forces of nature, the rivers and the seas, would submit to them, but only as long as their faith remained strong and pure. Their worldly power was just a reflection of their spiritual state.
Ultimately, what these stories show us is that the focal point of their lives was their faith. Everything else, the conquests, the wealth, the power, it was all secondary. Those things were just the stage for the real drama, the test of a person's character and their sincerity.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. If conquering entire empires can be seen as a dangerous test instead of a final prize, then it kind of forces us to ask ourselves, what is the true measure of victory?